Hey guys, what's going on? I'm back here on the scene. Drew Danger here, representing Texas, the Von Erich family. Now, how many of you guys out there are wrestling fans? How many of you guys are enjoying Dark Side of the Ring, which is a biography like show where they get on and talk about certain strange events that's happened in professional wrestling? Some of them can be entertaining and some of them are really dark. Like it went from like mildly entertaining to like this is messed up. But you know what? Here's the thing, guys. It's the truth. And the truth kind of hurts and the truth is not always sunshiny. It's kind of dark, man. But an episode, that I really enjoyed. Also, the A&E biographies. I haven't got a chance to see all of those yet. I was really glad to hear that they did those. Before I get into this, they did one on Bret Hart, the Hitman, who you guys know I love, and I love Booker T. And they finally gave him his due. Goodness, they gave him his due. Guys, check this out. Booker T. For those of you that are wrestling fans, the name speaks for itself. You guys know how huge he is. Did you guys know he never had a biography done about him before? And the big kicker, check this out. He does not have a DVD box set or a Blu-ray box set at all with all his matches on him. That is the biggest slap in the face. This guy was five-time as he does, five-time heavyweight champion, one of the greatest tag teams of all time, conquered the business, names out there, stuff flying off the shelf, well known, well respected, well loved, and he does not have one box set. I went looking, there was one disc of some really old matches before he even went to WCW or NWA. Before then, I think it was during his global reign when he was with Global Wrestling, and they're kind of like random matches on one disc. The quality's not that great. That's how you do one of the greatest performers in that sport. Like, where's his box set? So I'm just telling you guys this because it was getting on my nerves. I couldn't believe it. So he finally got it. But back on the Dark Side of the Ring, they just released the Dynamite Kid one, which I did see, and whew, that one was trippy. But the worst one was Jake the Snake, man. When they started talking about his dad, Grizzly Adams, and his sister Rockin' Robin, and all the stuff like that, and his sister-in-law, who used to be Baby Doll, used to hang around the Four Horsemen and all that. Oh my gosh, man, that one was scary, man. That Grizzly Smith, uh, that one was something else. I mean, word of the wise, if you have not seen Dark Side of the Ring and you haven't gotten down to the episodes yet, just be aware that they are some trippy, dark episodes. They do talk about the Bruiser Brody murder. They do talk about the Montreal Screwjob. They do talk about what was her last name? Nancy. I think her last name was Argento. I can't remember her exact last name. But it was the girl that Superfly Jimmy Snuka was accused of killing. There's that story, and all these stories are really messed up. I think the most lightest one that I remember was the Fall Brawl one. It was ridiculous, and that was about it. And everybody told their stories. But the other ones, yeah, they're dark, man. They have to do with murder. Gino Hernandez, his murder when he overdosed on cocaine, apparently. So they're all stories like that. But I'm getting to one that's near and dear in the heart to me. That it has a very special place to me because I'm going to talk about the Von Erich family. That's why I'm wearing Kerry Von Erich. That's why I'm wearing my Texas hat representing the Von Erich clan. I was a huge Von Erich fan. I love those guys, even though they were a little bit before my time. They were during my time. I was just really, really young. And by the time I came on the scene, we knew WWF, NWA, which was becoming WCW at the time. So those were the two major companies. So World Class Wrestling, which is where the Von Erichs really hung out. Um, I didn't really know them at that point yet. I was familiar with them because at the time, my favorite Von Erich, which was Kerry Von Erich, was also known as the Texas Tornado at WWF, and he had had a contract um, with them at the time when I was a kid, and I loved the Texas Tornado. And he was known as the Texas Tornado, but then later on, I saw robes he would wear. They didn't say Texas Tornado; they said Kerry Von Erich. And my brother had a lot of wrestling magazines, Pro Wrestling Illustrated and stuff like that. And I would look through them and I'd say, oh, there's a Texas Tornado. His name's Kerry Von Erich? Well, it made sense. He had a real name, but he was like really pushed hard with that name. And the Texas Tornado thing was just something he was doing at the time. Um, so I looked at the magazine and found out his real name was Kerry Von Erich. And then I found out about Kevin and David and Mike and Chris. Found about the Fritz Von Erich, his father, and the whole thing about that. And like I said, since it was a little bit before my time because I was young, I was around, but I didn't know about the smaller companies like that. And then I started to look into the Von Erichs history because a friend of mine had on a DVD years later some of the matches of the Von Erichs, and I took an interest in that, learning more about the Texas Tornado, Kerry Von Erich. And when I found out the story, it was shocking. My goodness, talk about a family tragedy. We can talk about the Hearts and their tragedy, which it definitely was, but when you get to the Von Erich stuff, it gets downright just sad and strange. So let's get into it. So the beginning of the Von Erich run kind of starts in tragedy. Like it starts out, you have Fritz Von Erich, the father, who is wrestling, and he's the world's greatest heel, at the time, which is the villain. He was trained by Bret Hart's dad, Stu Hart, another legend, someone who became legendary. Harts do it the best, guys. So you're looking at, Fritz coming in, being this, I believe he was a Nazi sympathizer character, not in reality. Just as his character, and it got over like crazy, and he came up with this move called the Iron Claw, right? And that was the signature move of all the Von Erichs, but Fritz Von Erich made it first, okay? And he would put it over the opponent's head, and he would squeeze right here, and it'd squeeze the life out of him. It was a little weird submission hold. It was great. The hand paw was always the coolest thing, and that's how you knew it was a Von Erich, because they would all come out, representing that. Even Kerry Von Erich's daughter, Lacey, she does it. So, it's kind of a signature move. But anyway, I digress. So years go by. Fritz has 6 sons. Okay, and his one son, Jack Jr., because Fritz's real name was Jack. Jack Jr. died. I believe he was like 6, 7 years old. Super young. He got electrocuted and he fell. And I think if they had gotten to him, he probably would have survived. But they didn't. And he fell face first into a puddle of water and he drowned. And they literally found his little body outside their trailer home. You talk about coming home to something shocking, man. That shook me because I'm a parent, and to see one of my kids, I only have one, but to see my kid that would tear me up. That would tear me up. So Fritz and the brothers, they're already hurt. Who would have thought? So young, bright future, all that, in a freak accident. And the reason I'm getting to the Von Erich tragedy is because it's called the Von Erich tragedy for a reason. Because there were 6 Von Erich brothers. Okay? So I already mentioned Jack Jr. There's Kevin Von Erich, Kerry Von Erich, David Von Erich, um, Chris Von Erich, and Mike Von Erich. Now I should probably go Mike, then Chris, because Chris was the youngest. And they're all boys, and Fritz trained them to be great wrestling champions. Now, the thing about it was um, Kevin, David, and Kerry went to be like that. Mike and Chris didn't have the skills that their older brothers had, unfortunately. And sometimes that happens. Um, so um, the banking was really on those 3. So we talked about the passing of Jack Jr., unfortunately. So he's gone and he's passed away. And then you get to David Von Erich, who they said if David had lived, Texas to this day would be a huge territory and would become a big mogul kind of business. And he was the kind of wrestler that could really bring some things to the forefront. He had talent, he had psychology down, he had the things working. Um, and unfortunately, he died of digestive stomach issues, and then his stomach sounds like it imploded in some way and caused an issue. But there was a talk possibly about drugs that were hidden as well. How do I feel about that? I don't know, but I know the guy is gone, unfortunately, and he was known as the Yellow Rose of Texas, the most loved Von Erich, the most gifted Von Erich. Like he really could and did understand the business very well. Then you have, um, we get to Mike Von Erich, and Mike had been wrestling in, I believe, Israel, and he had had an injury, and he had had an emergency surgery. And on the way back to Canada, I mean, not Canada, sorry guys, Texas, um, he had gotten some sort of infection. And they had to put him in the hospital immediately, and he almost just about died. He survived, but his brain, his thinking, everything was off, and they didn't know why or what to do about the situation. And then he ended up taking, yeah, that was the right brother. He ended up taking drugs, buried himself in a sleeping bag, and died, from a weird overdose and not wanting to live, I guess, and the situation ended up being kind of strange, right? Then you get to my favorite Von Erich, which is Kerry, the Texas Tornado. Um, Now, as much as I love Kerry Von Erich, I am not going to sugarcoat what happened. Kerry Von Erich was on steroids. Kerry Von Erich was uh, wrapped up in all sorts of things. I think he possibly owed drug dealers money, in my opinion. Excuse me, guys. And he ended up, what ended up happening was he ended in a motorcycle accident and lost his foot. Now, the thing about his foot was he kept it hidden for all these years, like nobody really knew about it. He had a wrestling boot with a prosthetic in it set up, and he could still wrestle. He could still get down. You would not know the difference because he was that good. But out of I'm sorry, guys. I'm fading out there. Oh, so tired. Um, so Kerry ended up losing his foot on a motorcycle accident. Now there are 2 stories about this. Um, Kerry was going to get drugs. It was one story I heard. He just happened. The other story was he just happened to drive his motorcycle um, off, and he ended up crashing into a car just for some reason, and his foot got mangled. What do I think? I think that yeah, he was definitely doing some drugs, because when it's shared with other wrestlers, they would talk about how they would, like, he'd show up to the shows like late and stuff like that, and put on his gear, and he'd put his gear on backwards and stuff like that, and then he would take a certain medication, and then all of a sudden he'd be all, oh, and couldn't even talk. And he fell out of the ring when they were working. He like straight just fell out of the ring, like clumsy, like he's like so strung out on drugs, and he fell out of the ring. And people had to help him, and work it around it and make the match happen, unfortunately, because Kerry was messed up. So it was no secret Kerry was in bad shape, and needed help ASAP. So what ended up happening with Kerry, besides the foot loss injury, was he he had gotten in some trouble, and was looking at some jail time, and he went and saw his wife and said, "Hey, if I do this, will you take me back?" She says, "I don't know." So he couldn't take that, and knowing he, I guess, thought he couldn't take prison too much, and all that, so he ended up taking his own life by shooting himself directly in the chest and dying, which was really sad, because like I said many times, guys, I love Kerry Von Erich. Then we get to Mike, not Mike, Chris. I think we already talked about Mike. So Chris Von Erich uh, didn't have a lot of the athletic skills, didn't had a lot of issues, had a lot of problems and stuff like that with his body. He was a good dude, but they tried to make that work. I think he got some sort of injury or fracture, and he just couldn't live with himself. Just like, man, I let the family down, and he ended up shooting himself in the head and dying out. And those situations were very tough. So and I know you guys are like, oh, six. Yeah, Kevin Von Erich. He's the only brother that's alive, and he has two sons that started professional wrestling and do very well, and are cool-looking guys, and it seems like it's coming together. But Kevin will say, like, you know what? I tried to do right by my family the best I could, and I understand that. I also think that Fritz had such high expectations, it rubbed off on all the kids, to where they were really trying to appease him and trying to, get him to, uh, you know, um, change his ways, whatever that situation might have been, whether if it's good or bad. But they had their own ideas, and they were kind of wild. So I know we want to paint a pretty picture, but the reality was they were kind of wild. They needed more discipline, and they were too fearful of failing in the thing of hurting their father. And I feel that with Fritz, that was a very unreal expectation to have for your kids. It's very sad. So um, I really um, was very hurt about the history of the Von Erich family, because I was such a fan, and they were so talented. They're one of wrestling royalty, and very well known, even outside of Texas. And just to hear the tragedy of what happened to that family, that beautiful family just, and even Mom Von Erich, the wife, she couldn't take it anymore. She got up and she left, and I would say she filed for divorce and walked away, which is really sad. But you kind of can't blame her when you lose five of your children and you got one left. What can you say? So it was a very tough situation. Dark Side of the Wrestling did a great piece on it. If you guys have time, check it out. It was really good. So anyway, that's my take on the Von Erich family. It's a sad tragedy. Love those guys. But yeah, guys, tune in more. There'll be more videos. Thanks for all that you guys do. Thanks for supporting me. I'm sorry if I seem really tired. I got real tired all of a sudden, so I'm going to jump off before I pass out again. All right, guys, be good. Drew Danger out.